Welcome to the Ezra Straight to Video podcast. Big fight tonight. UFC, we got Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gone. Is it gone? Or is it gone? You know what I mean? Cyril gone or is it gone? No one really knows. Honestly, he doesn't know. That's the truth of it. And you might not even hear, like, what is he talking about? He's saying the same thing. If not, it's like gone and then it's gone. You know what I mean? Gone and then gone. Gone and then gone. It's a dangerous game we play, trying to say MMA fighters' names. It's a dangerous game. But we got a big fight tonight. And not only do I just want to talk about the fight, because I already have a podcast out on the fight. On Spotify, on Apple, wherever you find podcasts, most likely you have my podcast on there. And that's the Ezra podcast. Now, this is a straight to video podcast. What's the difference, you're probably wondering? What's the difference between the straight to video podcast between just the Ezra podcast? Well, straight to video podcast, we talk more about business. We talk about more big picture, right? I like to talk about the fights. On an audio podcast, I just feel like it's better you just plug it in and they talk about the fight that you're waiting for. And that's what I do. I talk about the fight. I give a breakdown. I give my thought on what could happen, my prediction, right? On this, like, we're talking big picture. And when you talk about Francis Ngannou, right? And that's not beer, by the way. That's ginger beer. There's no alcohol in this. Just so you know, like, hey, this guy's belligerent on this. No, he's not. So we're talking about Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gone. And Gone. You're talking about the big picture here is that Francis Ngannou is right on the edge of what I imagine could be a breakout star. And he's having contract issues because he says he no longer wants to fight for 500 to 600K. And there is no reason that Francis Ngannou should be fighting for 500 or 600K minimum guarantee, right? No reason that should be happening. And he knows his worth. He has a big giant agency, right? That is an agent for actors, agent for other major sports stars. And the UFC was used to doing an old business model where they deal with really managers that they put in their position. Everybody that just kind of came from the UFC, came from that business. But now MMA is growing, UFC is growing. And these other giant agencies are saying, well, there's value in these guys. So we're going to get behind one of these guys. We're going to start managing them. And now Dana White has to argue with actual businesses that are maybe bigger than his whole thing, right? They're not dependent on him. They have revenue elsewhere, right? Not like Ali, whatever the hell his last name is, where all his guys are from the UFC. I mean, I'm sure he still got the Bellator, but his money makers from the UFC. So yes, he can go and argue and everything like that, but he knows that he can't burn that bridge because that's the only bridge he's got. These guys have multiple bridges. They could burn a few. And Francis Ngannou, if he walks away, right, wins this fight, right, that would be honestly like the best outcome, the most interesting outcome for Ngannou, but for the story of this, you know, of the big picture, right? If Gane wins, I'd be happy for him. I'm not against that, but I'm just saying, as far as the big picture and as far as the future of MMA fighters and getting paid and these contract disputes, and as far as the giant promoter arguing with a giant agency, it's less interesting, and it slows down really what happens next. But if Ngannou wins, right, and he says, I'm no longer going to fight into that contract. I want to be able to fight for millions of dollars, right? I want to be able to fight in boxing. I want to be able to, you know, just have the freedom and range of what a superstar should have. That's where it gets interesting. Because I don't think he's going to back down. And he could literally be out of his contract by December, supposedly. That's what the reports are saying. That's what he said. If he's out of his contract by December, then it gets super interesting. Because okay, so if he signs with Bellator, right, we're going to find out, we really are going to find out how big of a sport MMA is. Now, is it just the UFC? Is it just the UFC brand, right? Where, yes, you could be a star, but as long as you're within the UFC. I always use this example, is that in boxing, right, you're trying to create, they're trying to create TikTok stars, right, or YouTube stars, right? UFC is just trying to create YouTube or TikTok. And whatever you do within their format is up to you. And if you think about that, that's why they give no value to these fighters. That's why they feel like they don't have to pay these fighters. That's why they feel like they don't have to even fight these fighters. That's why Nate Diaz doesn't even fight that often. Nick Diaz don't fight that often. John Jones doesn't fight that often. Conor McGregor can fight whenever he wants, but they're not like, no one's begging Conor McGregor to fight. It's because they know the brand. They know what the brand does. They know the least amount of buys they're going to get. They know what, you know, if they did use the superstars, they know what the max they're going to get. But the most important thing to know is the least amount of pay-per-view buys you're going to get. That's the most important thing, because then you know what you can make, and you know what's going to make max, and you know that if you go over that, what you're going to lose. And so you could weigh your risk of like, are we risking paying these guys this when we know our minimum is this, right? It's huge. And I don't think boxing knows that number. Boxing does not know that number. PBC's trying to find out that number by doing multiple pay-per-views this year, right? Supposedly at a minimum of 10. I think it's gonna be closer to 12. I think they're gonna do one a month. But they're trying to figure out what's the minimum. They think they have an idea. They think it's about like 100K, and they know that if they pay the guys a certain amount of money, they can at least break even or get it back, get some profit back. The UFC knows, and because you know why? The UFC has a deal with ESPN where they guarantee to pay them the minimum, right, of equivalent to 500K pay-per-view buys. ESPN is paying that automatically. Now, just think about this though, right? So if ESPN's paying that to the UFC, they're getting a guarantee on their pay-per-view, and then ESPN just, whatever the pay-per-view does, ESPN gets it back, right? The profits, all that, that's the thing. What would incentivize Dana White to put a fight, like a super fight on, like say, let's say John Jones versus Ngannou, and pay them each $20 million? When he's not even seeing excess profit to it, when he knows that he's getting paid 500K from just ESPN, that's the deal, right? There's business. Why would he pay them, John Jones and them, more money? Do you get what I'm saying here? Unless he can go back with ESPN and say, okay, I want to make this fight, the super fight. Now I need a more guarantee of what you're paying for this pay-per-view. The way the business and that's going to be run going forward, and the way the business is being run now, is not in favor of superstars. It isn't. It's not in favor of paying people more or paying people some giant amount of money. It's not. That's not the direction that they want to go and plan on going in the future. They plan on just the UFC. You know what it is. You pay and buy for the UFC, not for the fighters, for the UFC, and you pay your good money because you know that I'm going to put 5 competitive fights on. They'll be entertaining. Not for the names. The names are less important than ever. Colby Covington versus Usman, right, was their New York event. Supposedly, one of the biggest cards of the year. Colby Covington and Usman, while very good fighters, are not superstars. Now, they are good names within the UFC brand, but they are not superstars. They have very little value outside of the UFC, right? They're not Conor McGregor. They're not Ronda Rousey. They are not Brock Lesnar. But that is the new age superstar for the UFC, right? It's a guy that they have a controlled number on. He can never really exceed that number because there's not that popular demand outside of the UFC, right? That forces them to negotiate against someone else. They're just negotiating within themselves. And that guy's just happy to be there to get that number because he doesn't have that number anywhere else. See, with Conor McGregor, he fought Floyd. He has that number somewhere else. Brock Lesnar has the WWE. He has that number somewhere else. Francis Ngannou is getting to a situation where he might have that number somewhere else. We're about to find out. What is the long-term effects of this business model, right? Of just the brand, not the fighters. And if Ngannou goes to Bellator, are the MMA fans going to go with him, right? Are they going to follow? Are they going to buy pay-per-views that Bellator will throw? I have my doubts because Bellator has not been that kind of success. And Bellator had a big fight to me, and it has a guy that I would think could be a superstar. If he was in boxing, I would think had potential to be a superstar. If he was in the UFC, he for sure have more attention, and that's AJ McKee. And that on Showtime got about 100K views, if not less, or barely slightly more. So now Francis Ngannou, if he comes off this win, and he'll be the biggest heavyweight in MMA. He's a knockout artist, so he's fun to watch. They describe him as their version, MMA's version of Mike Tyson. He goes to Bellator. It's not really there's any reason why that shouldn't succeed, other than the fact that people aren't a fan of MMA, they're a fan of the UFC. That's where it gets interesting. If he goes out there and has a great fight and beats Gon and leaves and goes to Bellator, I want to know how many people follow him, and can they Bellator throw pay-per-views with his name on there? More realistically, right, where his money comes from, if he leaves, he goes to Bellator, they give him a deal where he can go fight in boxing as long as they get a cut of the promotion of it. And he goes fights Tyson Fury. That's where his big payday comes. But the more interesting thing is, how does it work for Bellator? Does it raise Bellator stock? Does it raise their views? That's what we're going to find out the business of MMA of where it stands. this fight's behind it. There's so much more to this story than just a great fight. And it's a great fight. It's a great matchup. It's probably the best heavyweight matchup to me in the UFC of all time. That's not hyperbolic. I really believe that. That's honest. That's me being honest. I feel like my lighting's bad. Let's work on here. Let's get it. A little brighter. Let's go there. Right. I'm not even sure that made a change, but I want brighter. I was feeling it. The UFC, it's smart. You know what I mean? It's smart. I was seeing something where Dana White was talking about, and this might have been a few years back. I don't think this was recent. He was talking about that he incentivizes the fighters to fight each other, right? That he doesn't pay them those big paydays because, you know, what's going to happen is the guys aren't going to fight each other. They're going to fight safe, right? Because they know they have a big payday. And when Dana White says these things, it's not because he truly believes it. See, that's the thing, is the foolish thing, is you think that he truly believes that. He doesn't believe that. He knows that's not the case. What he's talking about, right, and what he's doing is he thinks that you believe it, right? He thinks that that will fool the viewer. That's why he does say these stupid, simple things. It's not because he's dumb. It's because he thinks you're dumb. And to say that he's not going to pay the fighters because they won't fight, that's such a dumb reasoning, right? That's like something you would say about workers, right? Like he was like, I can't raise the minimum wage and people are going to get lazy. How stupid does that sound? Right? You know, some of the hardest workers in the world get paid the most money. That's the truth. You know, like, you think that Dana White doesn't work hard? He works very hard. And you know what he gets? Top dollar to do that. Did he get lazier? Did he get paid more money? No, because hard work and that, and people that want to accomplish that, and you know what happens when people get paid money? They want more money. That's usually what happens. It's called greed, right? And it's not 100% always negative, right? It's like, you know, I want more success. I crave it. I want to keep this going. That's why you have conglomerates that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, right? You don't think that 100 million is enough for someone to live very comfortably the rest of their life? Yes, it is. Why do they keep wanting more? Why do they keep running these giant businesses till they're like 90 years old? Wouldn't that mean that we get lazier? Isn't Floyd Mayweather, right, the most consistent fighter that we've seen in years, right? As far as, like, even with Canelo, right? Canelo Alvarez is a perfect another example. Consistent fighters get paid top dollar in boxing, and they're consistently in shape, and they consistently come to fight, right? They don't have no lackluster performances. Wouldn't they have that? Wouldn't that be the example? How about Conor McGregor? Does he get any boring fights? Now, I do think the money, you know, I did kind of diminish him a little bit as a fighter, but it didn't diminish the performance inside the cage. He's still aggressive. It wasn't like he fought safe. Such a stupid thing to say. And if you just have to think about it and realize how dumb it is to say, but the thing is that he's not dumb. He thinks you're dumb. He thinks I'm dumb. And we have to call that out. Like I said, where the business is going, the direction it's headed, we're going to find out. Are people MMA fans or the UFC fans? Are they a fan of the brand? Don't be loyal to the brands. I have no loyalty to brands. You hear people that say, you know, I am a Ford man. I bought a Ford for the past 40 years. It's impossible for Ford to be that consistent for 40 years. They were not the best car there for 40 years. And the fact that you just settled on a brand and stopped looking elsewhere, that's foolish on you. When it comes to fighting and boxing and promotions and all that, I root for the promotions. I want more success for all the promotions, but I'm not loyal to one promotion. No, keep giving me who's ever giving me the best product, I'm going to watch. I'll watch them all. I'm not loyal to one. Right now, the UFC has the best product. Bellator is finally doing the right thing and building their own fighters. Stop buying fighters that couldn't make it at the top level of the UFC and putting them in there and be like, oh, this is our top guy. It doesn't work because people think you're a secondhand product for that. Get your own guys. They finally started doing that. It's going to be a slow build, but they have the money behind them to do it. Now, if Francis Ngannou goes there, it gets really interesting, right? They get a little bit of a speed up card on what they're doing. It's the outcomes of tonight, right? And don't kid yourself, right? Do not kid yourself. The UFC is rooting for Ngannou to win this fight. The UFC is. They're rooting for Ngannou to win this fight because it's less trouble for the business, right? Ngannou loses a little bit of negotiating, right? If that happens, they're rooting for Ngannou, and that's not the first time UFC's done something like that. Thank you guys for listening. This has been the As Raw Straight to Video podcast.